Hey everyone, and no, I haven't disappeared. I was just on vacation, which is why there wasn't an episode last week. Anyway, Happy New Year, and let's dig into 2026 with first Torvalds talking about AI code in the kernel and taking a very specific stance on that matter. We also have the EU launching a consultation to potentially open up to way more open source at the EU level. And we also have some proposals to maybe remove middle click to paste, a feature that I personally think is mandatory on Linux, but that a lot of people seem to not really like. So we're gonna talk about that and plenty of other things, including our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace. They are your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your own website. They have really super easy tools to create your online presence, whether you know how to code or not. So they have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built and will suit any type of website, whether you're looking for a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are also optimized to give you solid SEO, and they even have a bunch of SEO tools that you need to make sure that your website doesn't end up in the last page of Google search results. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, and you can change the colors, the fonts, and just tweak the template however you want, or you can automate all of this. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features like creating your own online shop with a payment system that handles credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and more. You can even design your own logo from Squarespace and book your own domain name. So check out squarespace.com/TheLinuxExperiment or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Okay, so as the Linux kernel developers are currently talking about how to work with AI-generated code in the Linux kernel's codebase, Torvalds chimed in. He said there is basically no point in taking AI slop into consideration when you're talking about AI in the kernel, because people who contribute this code, in air quotes, aren't going to say that their code is AI generated. And so no matter your policy, no matter your rules, you will have to look at those patches to know if they were AI or not. So Torvalds says that AI is just a tool and that you basically can't really implement a no AI policy in the kernel, because if you do, people will just still submit AI slop and they will never specify that it is AI made, which means your policy is not effective because you're still going to have to look at those patches to know if they were written by AI. The conversation before that basically boiled down to, should we write a policy that allows AI contributions, or should we outright reject patch series if they're AI generated, with developers on both sides of the fence? You have the it's just a tool camp and the no AI at all camp, the later one emphasizing that the second you say AI patches are now allowed in the Linux kernel, but will obviously be reviewed as normal patches, then you will get the press saying Linux kernel accepts AI now, and this will just open the floodgates for everyone submitting their AI slop to the kernel. In Torvalds' opinions, basically there's no point in forbidding AI code being submitted to the kernel because that would just end up being hidden. People would still submit AI code, they would just not tell you that it is AI code, and you would still have to spend all the time. How he puts it is, documenting your patches is for the good actors, the bad actors will just not disclose if they use AI at all. Which does outline the current problem with AI-generated code. It's basically damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you do accept AI, then basically you have a bunch of patches generated by AI that you're gonna have to sift through, and this will take a lot of time. But if you say no AI allowed, then people will still submit AI-generated code, they just won't tell you that it is AI, and so you will still have to take a look at all those patches. And obviously, once you open those gates, you get tons and tons of stuff submitted to you, and it's already a difficult thing to manage when it's just humans writing the code. So as soon as AI starts generating crap or good code, then you just have a lot more work on your hands. And this is a problem that we are going to have to tackle in major open source projects at some point, because the development processes that we currently have are not really tailored for that kind of submissions, that kind of amount of submissions. Now, you could theoretically implement a priority system where you only review the patches made by people you know and trust, but this would potentially discourage new contributions to the kernel, because if your submission is not made by AI, but you're 10,000 places down the line in the review queue, then you're never going to get looked at, and so why would you start contributing in the first place? Now, we might finally be seeing the EU-wide push for open source that I've been dreaming of for years. The European Commission is launching a consultation open to any EU citizen or stakeholder or developer or whatever to see how the EU could transition from just supporting open source research projects to also support commercial open source software made in the EU. The goal being, of course, to have credible and useful alternatives to US-made proprietary software. Now, the gist of it is, as usual, digital sovereignty. The goal is to have software that you produce locally in your own economic and legal zone, so you have a little bit more control over it and you're not dependent on other companies from other countries. What they want to achieve is to develop and make as visible as possible EU-made, high-quality and secure free and open source solutions, making sure that the supply chain is secure as well, that deployment of these solutions is easy, that maintaining them is easy, that improving them is easy, and also supporting open source business models through public-private partnerships, which means public money going into private companies, except it's funding open source code that everyone can use, and so this is not as much as a problem as it usually is, in my opinion. Now, this is just a consultation, so it could very well amount to absolutely nothing in the end and not result in any directives or laws that have to be passed by various countries afterwards. But it still shows a big interest in the EU and the European Commission in open source software, and that's what we want to see. More open source software being deployed at the state level, at the EU level, because once you start teaching open source in schools instead of proprietary solutions, then kids that grow up to be adults start wanting to use those solutions at their workplace, start deploying them at the workplace when they have the responsibilities to do so, and so you're slowly pushing out the proprietary software over decades and replacing it with more sustainable open source solutions. That's what we want to see, but I'm not getting my hopes up. It is just a consultation for now. Now, GNOME and Firefox are considering disabling middle click to paste. If you didn't know, on Linux, in most programs and desktop, you can select some text and then just click the middle mouse button where you want to paste it, and it's just going to paste it here. It acts as a second clipboard. So you could copy something with Ctrl+C, but you could also have a second clipboard containing some text snippet that you can paste using the middle mouse button. It is, in my opinion, one of the best features of Linux that a lot of people don't know about. Now, GNOME says that this leads to unexpected behaviors. When people press that middle mouse button, according to them, it is used by a lot of other actions, and they say it's a dumpster fire to paste something without knowing that this will happen. So they're proposing to just disable it. Firefox is on the same page, and they're also saying it leads to user confusion, that it is not discoverable, and so they're considering disabling it at the GTK level or at the Wayland compositor level for GNOME at least. And I'll be honest, I don't think it's the right move at all. If you have a feature that is really useful in some cases, but potentially confusing because people don't know about it, then you showcase that feature. You have plenty of welcome tours in desktops and in browsers and anywhere. You could tell users about this feature and let them decide if they want to keep it or not. Now, obviously, GNOME and Firefox would leave an option to re-enable it, but I don't think the right move is to just disable it outright. It's to talk to people about it and let them decide if they want it or not. Now, for me personally, middle click to paste is an integral part of how I use my Linux desktop. If I don't have access to this, I lose a lot of productivity. But at the same time, a lot of people in the daily news show that you get if you become a Patreon member or a YouTube member, a lot of people there said that they just disliked that feature, that it was annoying to them, that they would rather use the middle mouse button for something else, that it always surprises them when it enables, when it pastes something. So who knows, maybe it's a bad feature, but you should probably just let people decide if they want it or not, and the only way to do that is to tell people that the feature exists, not to just disable it outright. Google is making more moves to sort of close down Android's codebase, it seems. they will now only publish source code twice a year. They had already closed their development practices when they decided they would not publicly share all the code that they produce. They would only share the finalized versions of Android, not every commit and the entire dev process. But now it's going even further, because starting in 2026, so right now, they will only publish code in the second and fourth quarters of the year. Now, Google says that it will help them manage multiple code branches, it will let them deliver more stable code to Android developers. They also say they will keep the Android open source project going, they have no intention of shutting it down. They also will keep publishing security patches every month on a dedicated branch. But it does mean that anyone who works on Android or a custom ROM now has even less material to work with. They will have to be many steps behind when it comes to working on that Android base and publishing their own work. And I'll be honest, I think the reasoning they are giving here is kind of weird, because a lot of open source projects are just bigger than Android, look at the Linux kernel, and they still manage to handle all of that pretty well with public commits. Everyone can see the code and use it at any point. I don't see how Google could not manage to do the same thing. It sort of feels like another way for Google to keep control of Android, making sure that everyone who bases their work off of Android is many steps behind and will have to rework a lot of stuff in between versions, because when the new version drops, then you're gonna have many more changes that you had not seen happen as time went on and you couldn't adapt to in advance. Now we have a crazy, weird project being started. It's called Loss32. This being a play on words on Win32, the Windows API. It's Loss32 because win and loss. It is not this time a Linux distro trying to masquerade as Windows but just using KDE with a theme. It's literally trying to run a clone of the Windows desktop on Linux through Wine. The rest of the base system would be Linux entirely, but the entire userland, the desktop environment, would just be programs made for Windows running under Wine. That this doesn't seem to be a copy of the Windows 11 desktop or code from Windows running on Linux. It seems to be a re-implementation of that desktop, either the desktop Wine provides or something ReactOS built, but basically everything you would run would be .exe programs. Now the reason they give for why this would be a good idea completely escaped me, because they say running .exe files is the thing that made their use of Linux possible, and that Win32 is basically the stable Linux ABI, being more stable than any other thing that we have on Linux. I absolutely cannot relate to that. I never need to run any Windows programs on Linux whatsoever. I have all the options that I need there, apart from games, of course. And I think the Windows desktop is just objectively worse than what we have, for example, with KDE, with GNOME, or even with Cosmic. So I don't really agree with the reasoning here, but the idea is very interesting, and it would also immensely help Wine, because if every program is being tested on there, if a specific Wine desktop is being run on there, it helps detect a bunch of quirks and problems and missing parts of Wine, and it helps potentially fix them, which means compatibility for Windows programs is improved. Now this is just a vision for now. There will apparently be a proof of concept available in this month, in January 2026, with a Debian repo to try things out, and then things will move from here. Now personally, I would never run a Windows-like desktop on Linux. I think KDE just outclasses everything Microsoft has produced in the past years, whether it's Windows 7, 10 or 11. KDE right now is just better than all of these, and I think that's kind of factual, not just based on my opinion, but of course feel free to dispute that. I also don't really need to run Windows programs on Linux, but I know a lot of people would love to. They really depend on a few programs that don't exist on Linux, or where our alternatives are just not up to par for the work they want to do. And if Wine can be improved thanks to this project, and it means those apps can run on Linux, then I am all for it. Now we have some pretty good news for AMD users, specifically AMD GPU users, because Valve engineers have been improving things immensely once again. A recent merge request for the RADV driver, this is the driver that lets you use Vulkan on Linux with an AMD GPU, well, this merge request changed a few things, and now ray tracing on RDNA 2 GPUs will be 30% faster, at least measured in the game Guardians of the Galaxy on a 6700 XT. These optimizations will land in Mesa 26, so probably in February, and this means AMD users will just get a huge performance boost in any game that uses ray tracing, and apparently that 30% boost wasn't enough because there's another merge request that would drastically improve ray tracing performance, but also boost the performance of any game running Unreal Engine 5, and this is also a huge boost because a lot of games are using this engine and they're not necessarily optimizing how they use it, so generally the performance of UE5 titles can be pretty spotty. So this merge request would make the Lumen illumination system of Unreal Engine 5 4 to 8 times faster on Linux, which would net yet another 30% improvement for games that use this engine. A user measured performance for Oblivion Remastered, which went from 45 to 56 FPS with the patch series. Silent Hill 2 went from 40 to 60 FPS. Layers of Fear from 2023 went from 75 to 98 FPS. All using the same hardware, the same config, just with the patches applied. Those are major boosts that will make any game you play on an AMD GPU much smoother, much faster, and basically at no cost for you, the user. You keep your existing GPU, which is good because these are getting crazy expensive again, and you just get better performance. It's fantastic. Now, you might know about Rockchip. They make some single board computer chips and single board computers as well. They got one of their repos on GitHub banned after FFmpeg filed a DMCA takedown request against it. Apparently, Rockchip just took FFmpeg's code and relicensed it, thus violating the LGPL that FFmpeg uses. Rockchip's media process platform apparently included many source files taken straight from FFmpeg's libav codec code, and this wouldn't have been a problem if they had kept the original license and attribution. But they didn't do that. They relicensed everything under the Apache license, which is not compatible with the LGPL in this specific case. Rockchip also apparently removed the original copyright notice and headers from the files linked to supporting the AV1, the H.265, and the VP9 codecs. Even worse, Rockchip was informed of that misdeed 2 years ago, and they didn't do anything to fix it since then, even though they said they would. Now, I find this pretty strange because it wouldn't have cost them anything to just include the code as it was with the original license and copyright. People would still have been able to download their software stack, their media processing platform, and use it, and it wouldn't have given them a bad rap. Now people just think they're a bad company or that they do shady stuff, when it was completely unnecessary. If they had wanted to take that code and put it behind a proprietary barrier with a licensing fee, I could have understood the lack of ethics in the face of wanting to make more money. But here, they're just republishing it as another open source license, and I don't really get why. Now, Fedora 44 will move all of its KDE-based variants to the brand new Plasma Login Manager, replacing the venerable SDDM. So if you don't know, SDDM is the login screen that KDE still uses, but it's not really an official KDE project. It's mostly used and contributed to by people from KDE or working on KDE, but it still supports plenty of other desktop environments. And relatively recently, KDE decided that they needed tighter integration between the Plasma desktop and their login manager, and so they forked SDDM into Plasma Login Manager, or I'll call it PLM. It's apparently ready enough that Fedora can see them using it as the default. So PLM will actually be part of the KDE 6.6 release in February, and it should allow, in time, for display and keyboard brightness control at the login screen, for full power management in the login screen, for pairing Bluetooth devices there, for logging into known Wi-Fi to allow for remote LDAP logins. It also better supports virtual keyboards, keyboard layout switching, screen readers, remote desktop logins, and more. Not all of this is implemented currently in Plasma Login Manager, but these are the goals they want to reach with this new system. It makes sense. This is what Plasma recommends as the default. This is what they're going to ship as part of the KDE desktop. Fedora has always been one to jump on those things and adopt them first, and that's what they're doing here. I think it makes sense, and honestly, a lot of the problems I have with KDE come from that login manager, not detecting sometimes my Bluetooth keyboard and mice, not supporting keyboard layout changes there. A bunch of those small usability problems will be fixed by Plasma Login Manager, so I think that's a good thing. Now let's finish this with some gaming news. First, Linux keeps growing in the gaming sphere. The Steam market share for Linux is now at 3.58% for the end of December, after they initially published it at 3.19%, which would have been a small drop. The end result is that it's actually another progression of Linux. This is yet another record for Linux on the Steam market share, and we're slowly but surely pushing towards the 4% mark, which, let's be honest, is still very small, but it does reflect the relatively rapid growth of Linux as a gaming platform. Each percentage point is probably thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people using Linux, so it's not nothing. AMD is still, of course, the preferred platform with 67.4%, although the Steam Deck is dipping quite sharply. It's now only representing 13.37% of the Linux market share. But in terms of distros, SteamOS is still listed at 26.32%, which is strange, because if the Deck's APU is only 13.37% of the hardware used amongst Linux users, I don't see how SteamOS, which is currently kind of exclusive to the Steam Deck apart from one other device, the Legion Go S, I don't see how the market share could be double that, but maybe there's an error in reporting, maybe I'm missing something. These are small increments, of course, but we're well on our way to end the year at maybe 5 or maybe even 6% of the Steam market share, and every single one of these percentage points means more users, more chances that developers take an interest in making either a Linux port or making sure that their anti-cheat solution works for Linux, so it's all good for the entire Linux ecosystem. More Linux users equals more fun, more stuff, more support, it's nice. And finally, it looks like Geforce Now will add native Linux support to their application, or at least they're planning to do so. That info was apparently under embargo, but it was, of course, spilled early by some websites, so now it's basically public knowledge. To be clear, I'm not under any embargo from Nvidia, I'm not violating anything, I never signed anything, Nvidia doesn't talk to me, they don't even know I exist, and I'm fine with that. Now, you already could install the Geforce Now app on a Steam Deck, but on other Linux systems it detected that you weren't using a Steam Deck and it didn't work properly. At least when I tried it, it just wouldn't run. It should release soon on Linux as a beta, and it will go live in stable later this year. I personally don't much care about this, but this could be a good solution for playing those games that don't support Linux, specifically the ones using anti-cheat. Of course, that will only be useful if you have a very solid internet connection, even with my full fiber and really being in front of my router, which is not my ISP's router, it's a good router. Even with all of that, cloud gaming has never really performed adequately for me. You have some frame drops, you have some image quality degradation, you have some latency in the sticks. I don't think it's a suitable solution in a lot of cases, but it is also pretty useful for certain games that you wouldn't have been able to play otherwise. So it's good to see that. And it also shows that Nvidia sees Linux as a viable gaming platform, which I think is good. Now, what's also good is the devices made by our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. So you all know about Tuxedo by now. They've been sponsoring this channel for more than 3 years now. I only use their devices to do everything that I do on this channel, on this podcast. They're just fantastic. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux out of the box, that have great Linux compatibility with plenty of hardware, form factors, sizes, and internals that you can pick. A big number of keyboard layouts as well. They ship to most countries in the world from Germany. They're just a fantastic solution if you want a device that you know will work with Linux perfectly. I can only recommend them. So as usual, the link to check out their stuff is down in the description. Anyway, this will conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to it or watching it or whatever you did in the middle of this playing. You know where all the YouTube buttons are and why you should click them. Please do so the channel can recover from my vacation, because that's always pretty rough on the numbers. And also you have plenty of links down in the description. If you want a daily version of this show, you can get that down there. Thanks for listening, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!